We have further confirmation that the New Orleans Pelicans plan to blow everything up with their roster leading into the trade deadline. Plus, NBA front office are terrified of the second tax apron and thus aren't offering as much as they used to for even star-level trades. And the Clippers, man, they're about to probably blow up their roster as well. We're going to talk about all that and more on today's NBA Central.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. And we're coming right into it, right? So this one comes fresh off the presses. Jake Fisher talks about the Pelicans and their willingness to not only listen to trade offers for Zion, but also Trey Murphy and Herb Jones as well, saying this. You can rest assured the Pelicans will be listening on trade offers for Williamson. And there are definitely teams that have told me as recently as today, New Orleans is now starting to listen to at least show willingness to listen to Herb Jones and Trey Murphy as well. Those guys are going to have a lot of interest around the league. They're both on very strong long-term contracts that are considered relatively team-friendly, under $30 million in average annual value, which is a big threshold in this current market. Now, here's the thing. Both Herb Jones and Trey Murphy III are really, really good basketball players. Are they star-level players? No. Could maybe Trey Murphy still ascend there? Maybe, but I think even if you're looking at Trey Murphy, he's probably can be second, third best player on a team with his two-way ability. I know his defensive rating isn't necessarily the best on the season, but his on-ball defensive numbers are really, really good, right? And so Trey Murphy III, as a player that can fill it up and give you 25 while also playing some pretty solid defense for you, is really important. You look at Herb Jones, this guy's a 3-and-D wing by definition that you want exactly on there. And so when you look at it, Jones signed a 3-year, $68 million extension in July, so teams will still be having him for a while. He does have a player option for the 2029-30 season. Murphy and the Pelicans signed a 4-year, $112 million contract in October of 2024 that runs to the 2029 season as well. And then you have Williamson, who was signed through 2028, and we already know the value that his contract has on it as far as having that opt-out at the end of every year in the summer that you can get out of that as well. So things looking pretty up for the Pelicans if they do decide to do that and completely re-trigger their roster and focus on the younger players that they are developing with that. There have been a lot of talks and trade rumors around Trey Murphy, and a valid question a lot of NBA fans have had is why would they move on from Trey Murphy? And it's because if you're going an actual full rebuild, you may get the most. Like, he makes, I think, $31 million in the last year of his contract, and when you look at the production that he's providing, there's no doubt about it, that contract is going to be valuable, right? Now, of course, you run the risk of something like the Desmond Bane situation where he gets traded, he goes to a new situation, and he hasn't quite looked like what he's looked like, as far as putting up the numbers in Memphis, even though that's starting to turn around for him. But you look at Trey Murphy III, man, averaging over 20 points per game that he's doing, 6 rebounds, 3.5 assists, also 1.5 steals per game as well. This is a guy that can play off ball, on ball. He can get you a lot back. And while Herb Jones does not necessarily produce the number of points, he only averages 9.5 points per game. He's had 2 years of averaging double-digit points. That's the last year and the season before that. So he can be about a 10, 11 point per game scorer for you. Shooting decent percentage from three-point range. He's a career 36% shooter from three, but the on-ball defense that Herb Jones provides is just amazing, right? So that leads you to, if the Pelicans are deciding and looking at this and saying that we're now willing to listen to that because we want to really focus in, Jake Fisher he continues on where he says this. The Pelicans are going to hold a high price and are going to need multiple first-round picks to move from either of those guys. That's my understanding as of now. But right now, it's pretty clear that the Pelicans, with James Borrego as the interim coach, are moving in the direction of a team built around Jeremiah Fears and Deriq Queen. So we'll see, right? The Pelicans did part with their own first-round pick as part of the Deriq Queen trade in the 2026 draft, which they got a lot of flack for at the time. And while Deriq Queen still looks like a really good player, if that pick ends up being top 3 in this draft, right? Like, much less if the Atlanta Hawks luck up and get the number 1 pick, right? Then of course it's still going to be questioned on the value there. But the Pelicans can recoup some of that and try to get multiple first-round picks back, maybe even in this draft, if they decide to move on from Jones and Murphy III. And, the Zion thing is all interesting. We've heard that Zion doesn't necessarily have the trade value out there that, would be expected if he was fully healthy. But now you just have to come to the question on, is this the best move for the Pelicans? And if they are truly ready to move on and build around Fears and Queen, and they think they can eventually get to something sustainable, but while being bad for a couple of years, that's probably the best outcome for it. They still have a number of players other than these guys, like DeJounte Murray still technically on the roster. You got Jordan Poole, right? You got these guys that you can, look to move off of if you need to as well, or if the market's there for him. Poole's probably going to be stuck for a while, right? DeJounte, he can't get healthy, so he's probably going to be stuck for a while too. But, the Pelicans now could be a team that's going to be one interesting to watch as you lead into the trade deadline, because if you're a team that's, a playoff team or even a contender, you can add a Trey Murphy III to your team or a defensive wing like Herb Jones to your team. That changes quite a bit for you, to be 100% honest. So we'll see what the Pelicans end up doing in that case, who they end up moving off of. But let me know what you guys think on all of that down below. Let's move into the next one. And, with talking about the Pelicans, reportedly they want multiple first-round picks back for either one of those guys. The question is, are they going to get it, right? And this one also comes from Jake Fisher, who talks about, this one comes from Windhorst, who talks about the value of first-round picks. He says this: what I'm telling you is that when I talk to executives, and these executives are not in trade talks with the Bucks or another for a star player right now, the mood in the NBA right now is not to give up 4 first-round picks for anyone, right? Okay, maybe if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander came on or Wemby, like, people don't want to do that because the aprons have spooked so many teams. All these teams are worried about getting into the apron trouble where they can't reset their rosters, and you get into a situation like the Celtics where you have to rip your team down. This is how teams are thinking right now. They're a little freaked out about aprons. They're going to be no 5 first-round pick trades. I know that we saw those for a while. That's just not going to happen. Now, for example, the Memphis Grizzlies just got 4 first-round picks back for Desmond Bane. Now, those picks aren't slated to be necessarily the best picks, right? But they got that back for Desmond Bane, so you just never know, right? But the fact that teams are now kind of thinking more, this is what Adam Silver, this is what the NBA wanted when they created the second tax apron, is that it makes you have to think more about how you build your roster. It makes you have to think more about just throwing out picks because you want to hold on to those. And sometimes you have to protect franchises against themselves, right? Because you have to hold on to those picks, because if what you're doing doesn't work, it makes it easier for you to reset the deck at some point, right? So when you look at it and you see how what players like Anthony Davis, Paul George, Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Mikal Bridges, Desmond Bane, how many first-round picks were moved for those guys? And not to say that those teams regret it at all, but you just see, like, it's a mixed bag, right? And the return on investment becomes even more important, that you can win right away when you include that many picks for a player like that. And so while you have teams like the Pelicans that are hoping to get multiple first-round picks back for Jones and Murphy and Zion, they're going to be, teams are going to be a lot more kind of thoughtful on how many picks they give up on any given scenario. And I think that's right for franchises. That's smart for franchises, right? So when you hear, like, for example, my Bulls saying that they aren't interested in giving up their core and picks for a player, even this player as good of Giannis, that kind of leads to that, right? Is that teams do not want to put themselves in a financial situation with the second tax apron and then also not have their picks, and then you're kind of just stuck, right? When you're not adding decent young talent to your roster that's on cost-effective contracts like rookie scale deals, it's just it ties your hands even more than just having the big contracts, right? So, that's going to be something that teams look out for, that they're going to be trying to avoid in this new era, now that we're in the second tax apron era. And I for one don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it for fans that want to hear the team making moves and move all these picks for these players, yeah, it makes it suck a little bit more when you hear that your team's not willing to make a move on X player because, they don't want to give up their core and picks. But I think in the long run, you're probably going to see it work out for the betterment of the franchises more than it doesn't. And that's just my opinion. But I guess we shall see how that ends up working out for the teams and everything else. But moving on from that, right? Let's move on and talk about another team that could be looking to really blow up their roster, and that's the Los Angeles Clippers, right? Of course, the Clippers have been in the news a lot this whole season between the Kawhi Leonard scandal situation, Chris Paul now moving on from the team, the Bradley Beal acquisition and him losing his season, and overall, it just being a struggle of a season so far for the Clippers, right? Brian Windhorst and Tim Bontemps were talking about the Clippers and said that the Clippers could look to move off the contracts of Harden and Kawhi Leonard sooner rather than later, with the goal of creating cap space to improve in this upcoming offseason. Tim Bontemps noted that the Clippers have indicated a willingness to move up their cap space timeline from 27 to 2026, and one assistant general manager told Windhorst as well that creating flexibility could create a path for them to be competitive next season. Saying this directly, right? There are a lot of ways to use cap space. If they don't believe in the core, they could really turn their team over in a year if they got flexibility. You look at what they figured out in Phoenix. They had a team that was too old and turned over the roster, and it changed their entire outlook. Could something like that be coming for the Clippers? Sure, right? Now, the Clippers are one of the oldest teams in the NBA, right? And that's something that's difficult. But, you know, the fact is, and Bontemps says this as well, is that it could be easier for them to move Harden than Kawhi Leonard. And James Harden, you know, we've heard the rumors before. We've seen how James Harden acts at times when he's ready to get out of a place. If he's ready to get out, we'll see. We'll see it in his production. We'll see it in his performance. We'll see it in how he acts. And it could. He's owed $39 million this season and $42 million with a player option in 2026-27. So it's not like teams are attaching themselves to long-term bad money when it comes down to that. And for what it's worth, Harden's having a very strong year. 27 points, 8.4 rebounds, 5.6 rebounds per game as well with the 8.4 assists. Like like James Harden is still putting up really good numbers. Now, are some of those numbers a little empty? You know, there's a conversation to be made about that. I won't necessarily say I feel that way, but there's, of course, always a conversation to have with that one. Kawhi Leonard's making $50 million this season and $50.3 million next year. And, you know, of course, I know people are going to say with the shit going on there, they may want to move him, so the contract's not going to get voided, y'all, right? And while he's still averaging 26 points, he's only played in 10 out of 22, 23-ish games so far. So, you know, at this point of their careers, James Harden and Kawhi Leonard have a lot more basketball behind them than they do in front of them, right? And so, I don't think you're going to get a huge deal for either one of those, like a huge set of assets. But if you feel confident that what you can do with the cap flexibility that you get with moving off of either one of those guys, it could create a space for you where you feel like that's the spot that you need to go, right? Both players are now in their mid-30s as well. And so they could hit, a free agent market, in the summer that they do, that could include Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant. Like, there are a lot of players that could be out there and older players at that point in time. So, we'll see what happens there, and we'll see what the Clippers decide to try to do. You have, of course, players like Trey Young, Zach LaVine, Kristaps Porzingis, players that could be available in free agency this upcoming summer. So if they do kind of reconfigure their cap space and want to use it more in 2026 than 2027, there's some interest there on what players that they can add. So the Clippers being another team that you can bet could be looking to blow it all up here at the trade deadline, it makes some sense for me. We just got to see what the Clippers are going to end up doing. But, let me know what you guys think on that down below, man. I appreciate you guys for rocking with us here at NBA Central. The trade season is about to be absolute chaos. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, like the channel as well, because we're going to be covering everything as it happens, especially during the trade season as well. Let me know which team do you think makes the first big move, not just out of the teams we talked about today, but just overall in the NBA season. Which team do you think makes a big move first leading into this trade deadline? Let me know what you guys think on that. Make sure you're following us at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. And I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Bye tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.